This is a safe space as a webinar, so please do feel free to take part in the chat and in the question and answer session that I'll talk about in a minute, but please do be respectful of other people and keep this as a safe space. At the end of today's webinar, we will have a chance for everybody who's in attendance to ask questions of our fantastic panelists. And there at the bottom of the screen, you will see there are two options in which you can interact with us. One is the chat function, which so many of you are using now to introduce yourselves, which is great. And then you'll see the section next to that, which is Q&A. I would ask that you put any questions in the Q&A box rather than the chat function, because it makes it a lot easier for us to then be able to see which questions are coming forwards. If you see a question come forwards from a different participant that you really like the sound of and you would really like one of our panelists to answer, you can upvote, and that will just let us know that there are a number of people who would really like that question to be answered at the end of today's session. If we get more questions than we're able to answer, we will try to make sure that we follow up in an email afterwards. I've realised that I've not introduced myself, even though my name is in there. So my name is Laura Bondock. I'm the Practical Support Manager at NCVO, and I will be chairing today's webinar. I'm not expecting a fire alarm where I am today, so hopefully I shouldn't suddenly exit. Obviously, please look out for fire alarms in your own building and do follow the safety procedures wherever you are. Next slide, please. Fabulous. So today's webinar on successful charity partnerships will cover a few different speakers. So our first speaker today is Jessica Romo, who is a NCVO consultant, as well as being the director for Nexus Evaluation. And she will be talking to us about theory and best practice that she's picked up on while she's been working and supporting organisations to look at successful partnerships, how you start them, how you go through with them, and then how you evaluate them afterwards. We'll then be hearing from a really in-depth case study, which is a fantastic partnership between Utility Aid, CDA Herts, and a local authority. Unfortunately, because of the election period, the local authority sadly has had to pull out from today's webinar, but hopefully you will still pick up bits and pieces from what it is like to partner successfully with a local authority and have that kind of tripart relationship. You'll be hearing from Emily Berry, and she is the partnership manager at Utility Aid, who is one of NCVO's trusted suppliers. And she is passionate about saving the charity sector time and money on energy solutions. You'll also be hearing from Tim Hayward-Smith from CDA Herts, and he is one of the other parts of the partnership, and he's the Senior Rural Services Manager at CDA Herts, which also involves him being the county-wide Village Hall Advisor, and you'll be hearing more about how that relationship works later on. As I said, there's a question and answer section at the end where you get to have your own questions answered by our panelists, and then we will have a summary and a close with some resources that you can take away. For those who do need captions, there are captions enabled, so do feel free to press the captioning at the bottom if you would find that helpful on today's webinar. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this is a webinar being run by NCVO. We are the infrastructure body for charities and voluntary organisations across England. We have a membership of over 17,000 members across England. And it ranges from charities who have no turnover at all to charities that have 50 million and above. We have a wide range of organisations from many different sectors and many different passions. And if you are not a member, we would really love you to join us. If you do join us, next slide, please, there are many benefits of joining NCVO, and you will have access to further training and webinars, discounts from our trusted suppliers such as Utility Aid, further information on research, your chance to be part of networking, as well as taking part in policy and campaigns across the sector. Usually we have a free membership for any organisation under 30,000, but over Small Charity Month, over the course of June, so you've got this week to make the most of it, we have a special offer that we are extending that to charities with a turnover of under 50,000 who can take advantage of that free membership. Next slide, please. So in today's webinar, as hopefully all of you know when you were signing up to today's webinar, you will hear about some of those benefits and risks that you might come across when you're partnering with other organisations. And we're particularly today looking at that in the context of partnering with corporates and partnering with local authorities. We'll be looking at some of the successes, some of the challenges, and some of the best pieces of advice that we can give to others going through this. As I mentioned, unfortunately, due to the election, we weren't able to have the speaker from the local authority, but you should still be able to hear some kind of insights from that partnership. And we hope that by the end of the webinar, you'll feel equipped with a range of practical tips that you can then apply to your own future partnerships. Before we get started on the full webinar, we're going to have a quick poll to just have an understanding of who's in the room and who we're speaking to. So the first poll that you'll see coming up on your screens is to understand just the size of the organisations that we're speaking to within the room. So when it comes up, if you could just click on which amount, which kind of turnover it is that your organisation comes from, it would be brilliant to understand the size of the organisation that we have in the room. Amazing. Thank you for jumping so quickly on it. This is such a quick response. Wonderful. Brilliant. It's a real span of organisations. In fact, real span of organisations. It's fantastic to see. We've got the highest percentage at the moment who come from organisations around about 100,000 to 500,000, but we've also got people in the room who are under 30,000 and ones in the room who are over 5 million. So welcome to everybody from all sorts of different backgrounds. Hopefully this will be useful to you, regardless of which background you come from. You should be able to pick up something from all of this. The next poll that we've got is just to understand where you're at in your journey within partnerships and collaborations. So have a look down the options there and see whether there's any of these that kind of resonate with where you're at the moment. It might be that there's more than one, but I think unfortunately you can only select one of these. So the one that you feel like applies most to you. Amazing. We've got loads of people in the room who are just really interested in learning more. And a lot of people as well who are in those initial stage conversations and just looking at, okay, how do you move that forward? Now you're in those first stages of conversation. So hopefully this will be a perfect webinar to land exactly at the moment that you need it to in helping you to navigate those conversations or to find the perfect partnership for you going forwards. Brilliant. Thank you for that poll, Chanel. And I will now not take up any more of your time because you came here to hear from our fabulous speakers. So I will hand over to our first speaker today, which is Jessica Romo, as I said, who's an NCVO consultant and is the Director of Nexus Evaluation. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you, Laura, for that great introduction. I'm excited to be here with everyone. Next slide, please. So yeah, Nexus Evaluation is a minority-led consultancy company committing to maximizing our customers' social and environmental impact with systemic, culturally sensitive, and equitable approaches. And by working in the nexus between strategy, organizational change, and evaluation, research, and learning. And as part of the support that we provide and the experience that I have, we plan, evaluate, and learn from partnerships and help you do that as well. And some of these have really varied across my career. So some of them have involved charities partnering with smaller charities for international programs, funder-to-funder partnerships, and a mix of corporate and public or again, kind of different sectors partnerships. So a wide variety of things, but hopefully what we'll be talking about today will be good enough to cover different scenarios. Next slide, please. So we'll start with an easy question. Why partner? And obviously this is generally a very personal choice that reflects your core values, your vision, and what you want to do out there. But even for those that are not considering or are reluctant to partner, I'll say that there is an increasing push to do so, mainly because there is a recognition that we are working with very complex, difficult, long-term and systemic issues that require meaningful and effective collaborations and the creation of something that is bigger than the sum of its parts. This is why an increasing number of funders are designing mechanisms that create and nurture partnerships in their own right. So becoming a partner and knowing how to partner well is really a key organizational capability and a muscle to exercise. Some of the most ambitious partnerships that I've seen are those that bring organizations that are both natural allies and those that might be perceived to be working against the very desired and impact that you're aiming to bring about. And they tend to bring all of these different partners and organizations to work on a very defined issue or solution. So there's a lot to learn about breaking silos and aligning seemingly different organizations towards a desired goal. But partnering is also a learning opportunity. So you might think about your competitive advantage and new areas for development and how a new partnership might allow you to learn from others or be a springboard into a new area of expertise that you want to be seen as excelling at. This is why, for example, I am often very willing to work with competitors if that gives me the opportunity to learn or create new opportunities and relationships. But I will also say that partnership as a word is overrated. A lot of the time is used in ways that really do not reflect a meaningful partnership, and they tend to be more transactional relationships that miss opportunities to transform internally and to work in truly collaborative ways. For example, a lot of them might be just about delivering a set of activities that are within your area of expertise, rather than seeking opportunities to do things differently at the back of working together. I will say that a focus on relationships and people is a marker of a good partnership. It will show in everything you do, the type of governance structure that you design, the processes you implement, and the ways of working in that partnership or collaboration. But perhaps a more interesting question is, next slide, please. Why should you consider not to partner? So a lot of organizations, particularly charities, develop partnerships strategies that clearly outline who they may not partner due to a reputational risk. But I also feel that many organizations often fail to assess whether the power dynamics are right. Big partners might bulldoze smaller collaborators, preventing you from having a meaningful relationship that allows you to reflect and respect your own organizational personal values. And there is a growing number of minority-led organizations that are respectful or increasingly aware of this and are advocating more publicly a change in power dynamics. For example, in a change in funding conditions for various grants. So worth thinking about that if you're at the stage of thinking of a memorandum of understanding or receiving a grant. What are the terms and conditions on offer and what that might say about your partner and the type of relationship that you might be entering into? The most courageous and smart decision you can make, both for yourself and your team, is to say no. Leaning into your intuition and really fighting against that fear of missing out. But saying no it doesn't need to be the end of a conversation or the relationship, but the start of a better, healthier, and more respectful one. For example, I once, not very long ago, I had to step back from a potential partnership because the governance model did not feel right to either me or the partner. This allowed me to step back and clarify my role, that of my company, and what I really needed to get out of a partnership. A few months later, having each one of us done our own reflecting and learning, we decided to partner for an even larger project, and it was fantastic. things felt clearer and easier, and we could have regular, candid conversations and provide each other with honest feedback. We then have collaborated since on a couple of other projects and have kept in touch outside. So again, trying to also not be transactional. Next slide, please. So most of you might recognize the key stages of building effective and impactful partnerships. And obviously scoping and building should probably be the first one and the one that takes most of your time. Most organizations spend time here discussing what and how to achieve, but I think more time should be allocated to understand whether you are working with a good partner, or indeed how to be a good partner yourself. So really worth thinking about what are the positive signals that you are looking for at that stage, and what should be part of your assessment in terms of red flags. For example, does it seem that their time is more important than yours? Do they actively seek your input and invite challenge? Or do they come across as always having the right answers? Are they open to feedback and are willing to adapt as needed? Again, these might just be questions that reflect some values, but really spending time to discover what might be yours, it's really worth taking the time to explore. So assuming that you're still on kind of have a good sense that this is a good partnership, then hopefully you will move on to the maintaining and managing that relationship. And this is where governance models and leadership styles are really key. So leaders and governance models are increasingly being asked to better reflect equity, diversity, and inclusiveness, which for many organizations has led to decentralized decision-making models, meaning that they are putting at the core those most impacted by the issue and those working closest to it. There is a project which I recommend you check out, which is called Transformational Governance. And it's funded by many organizations. One of those included Langley Chase. And they have been discussing this issue for a couple of years now, and they have a series of blogs online. And some of the things that they have discussed, and I was part of those discussions, is the role of executive boards and senior leadership within an organization, but also across complex partnerships and collaborative networks. So a deep dive into that is probably recommended. Now, when you move into the review and revising stage, I will really encourage you to think about the role of monitoring, evaluation, and learning. This shouldn't be something, especially the learning aspect, should ideally be something that is there from the beginning rather than something you commission at the end. And if you build a culture of evidence and learning, that will hopefully, again, support, particularly with reducing confirmation bias, but it will also allow you to have spaces to really understand what is working and what is not, and perhaps to create the space to have those more candid, difficult conversations. And these might involve perhaps having an external person to come and facilitate those spaces and be a critical friend, and really provide that extra bit of challenge, for example, but also having pause and review moments throughout your collaboration is really key in building that space. And what I will say about sustaining outcomes is, again, if you're working with complex dynamic context, then you're constantly trying to pivot, adapt, and evolve, not just what you want to do, but how you're doing it and in the partnership itself. So again, this is becoming a greater area of focus for long-term partnerships in particular. But what I have added here, and the source is a paper that I co-authored with other people, which I think unfortunately is behind a paywall. But what I added here since we wrote this and for this webinar is good endings. So I've been thinking quite a lot about these, and I have met a wonderful organization that specializes in providing support around endings. It's called the Decelerator. And again, really recommend checking that out. And this is because most organizations and people generally don't think plan and actively design for good endings. And I think part of that is about normalizing the idea that ending is not failure, that it is okay, and it is also as a valid strategic choice as any other. And generally good endings, again, in terms of planning, need, in addition to normalizing the idea, is really dealing with how it feels to end something, whether it worked or it didn't work, but particularly if it didn't work and it needs to end before you imagine it would do. And then other things that you will start planning for and thinking about is what happens to that relationship? How will you continue to nurture it after the project ends? And most importantly, what happens to the knowledge and experience that emerge from that partnership or collaboration? So again, really worth thinking about endings, proactively planning about them, and building that resilience and that emotional aspect of endings. Next slide, please. So by now, I touched on quite a few of these successful factors that help build effective and impactful relationships. But let me just go over a couple of them. So the first one that I will go through is the distributed leadership and governance structure, which I alluded to. And again, just to remind you that nowadays leaders are being challenged to really think about decentralizing and really innovating governance models. So top-down leaders can exert nowadays only weak control, particularly in complex and multi-stakeholder collaborations. And a lot of things really happen at the front line of organizations and projects. Information flows back to them really not very quickly, and it's prone to distortion. These effects are exaggerated when working in complex and unpredictable situations, or indeed across organizational boundaries. So a lot of leaders are now giving more responsibility to staff working closer to the front line who understand the situation best and empower them to make quick decisions and deploy resources flexibly to respond to any needs. In other words, leaders have a role in setting intent, but are increasingly worried and worry of dictating how change will happen. Now, the other point I'll leave you with is the accountability part of it, which is, I think, what most partnerships really struggle with, and one of the main reasons that a lot of them fail. So it's really important to spend a lot of time, and again, a lot of this is very relational in nature. So, but really, how do you hold each other to account as needed, particularly if you need to hold a powerful partner to account? And this is not just something that you work in paper, but it's a culture you create. And again, that relationship that you nurture and just developing skills, to be honest, both caring for that person and that team. And I'll leave you with that. And I'll pass on the mic to Emily Berry, Partnerships Manager at Utility Aid.
Thank you, Jessica. I thought your presentation was really insightful, and I'm definitely going to be deploying some of those strategies in my role as well, so thank you. Hello, everyone. As Jessica's already mentioned, my name is Emily Berry. I'm the Partnership Manager at Utility Aid, so a big part of my job is managing and coordinating partnerships from a commercial perspective, dealing with funders, but also with charitable organisations such as NCVO and CDA Herts as well. For those of you that don't know who we are and what we do, we are one of the largest energy brokers and consultancies for the not-for-profit sector. Our team focus on providing a high-level service, which includes things like account management, helping you find the best procurement deal for your organisation, and also supporting you with your journey to net zero. To date, we have recovered our charitable customers over 7 million now, which is very exciting. So I'm going to start off by moving us on to the first slide. If we could just move across to that one, please. Thank you very much. Before I went into the detail of our partnership and collaboration on this project with CDA Herts and the funder, I thought it was a really good opportunity for us to discuss the history of how this project actually started. So to give you a bit of background, we have a well-established partnership with CDA Herts and have done for many years. Tim, another one of our speakers today, and I have worked together for over 3 years now. And whilst our organisation's ethics align, I think it's really important to point out and highlight that actually Tim and I align in a lot of ways as well. And I think that's really important when you're working together and collaborating on projects. So our working beliefs, for example, are the same. This has supported a truly collaborative partnership and relationship specifically on this project. And it's been built really on mutual trust and respect, which I think echoes what Jessica's been speaking about already this afternoon. And in my opinion, this is a key contributing pillar to having a truly successful partnership. Over the years, we've collaborated on various different projects before this one. We've provided joint sessions to support CDA Herts members, including energy discussion groups during the energy crisis, and sessions all around net zero and how to become greener in your community spaces. So if we could just move on to the next slide, please, that would be lovely. But this all started with an initial project we ran with ACRE, of which are a framework of support organisations like CDA Herts that focus on supporting community buildings in rural areas. So I think it's really important for us to discuss how this all started. So in 2023, Utility Aid launched an initiative with ACRE, which was designed to understand and address energy concerns of England's 10,000 plus village halls. And our research showed that community buildings wanted to start their journey to net zero and make their spaces greener and more sustainable. But one of the biggest barriers they faced was just the sheer cost of having some of these works done. And some of these works were things like surveys on site, for example. A lot of these organisations are in really rural areas, so don't have necessarily mainstream access. So they're really paying for someone travelling to come to their building or premise. From the research gathered, we specifically designed a product to support these buildings, and this was a fully remote survey that could be carried out virtually via a mobile application. And the biggest benefit to this for halls particularly was the cost difference. So because we were carrying it out virtually with an assessor rather than in person, we could cut the cost right down to £195. And I think at the moment, any sort of surveys that you do realistically are anything between £800 to £1,000 in most cases. So then Tim approached myself about Utility Aid being involved in a project where community buildings and spaces based in Hertfordshire would receive a funded energy survey, and could we help in facilitating that? Which of course I obviously said yes to, because otherwise we wouldn't be having this talk today, right? So if we could go on to the next slide, I then wanted to talk about commercial perspective. I think it's really important to give you my commercial perspective working for a corporate organisation in terms of what we're looking for when we're trying to partner with an organisation, and provide you with some insights into that. So if you're working with any sort of corporate sponsors or anything like that, you can provide this as a framework when you're looking at these sort of suggestions. So one of the things that I look at is things like commercial risk, and looking through the lens of the project that we've carried out recently with Tim, there was limited risk really in it for Utility Aid. This was an opportunity for us to support community buildings with a quality service, and at the same time know that our assessors were going to be paid for their time. So everybody won, so the risk was really low for us on this project. Market insight is another area where organisations like ourselves really want to get more of an understanding of the sector. And this project specifically gave us a really unique understanding into how halls are tackling the issue of net zero and becoming greener in Hertfordshire. Framework is another area to consider and look at. It's a project that can provide us with key learnings and a framework to apply for future projects. So it's almost given us like a template that we can use again in different scenarios, and that's something to bear in mind as well in terms of thinking of the benefits. And lastly, another thing that commercial organisations are going to want to look for, as much as charities are, is visibility. They're going to want to be seen, to be publicised and show the works that they do and how they can benefit certain organisations. So moving on to my last couple of slides, if we can, thank you very much, that was quick. What went well? I really wanted to talk about what went really well in this project, because I think it's worth talking about today. So communication between ourselves and the other stakeholders in this project was really, really strong. We set up a reporting methodology at the beginning of the project, so we could kind of make sure that everybody was receiving the same information at a weekly interim. And we could also see the progress. So Tim could see it from his perspective, the funder could see it from their perspective, and we could see it from our side as well to identify any areas or anomalies. Promotion was another huge success. I'm blowing Tim's trumpet here because it was mainly Tim, to be honest, that did the promotion. Tim has a unique relationship with the community buildings in the area, knows everybody and knows what they're struggling with. So Tim was really able to act as the bridge for us to be able to communicate with these individuals and provide that service that a lot of them desperately needed. And the other thing that I think is really important, especially when you're doing a project that might come around quickly, is flexibility and adaptability. So during the project, we had to consistently adapt and change the way we delivered the project to ensure that we met the demand of what was needed and to also meet funding deadlines. And we were able to do that really easily because of our shared mutual understanding and respect for one another. I'm going to move on to the next slide now, please. Thank you very much. But like in all cases, we had to also look at what could be improved for next time, because this was a first for myself and also for Tim. And I think one of the things that a lot of us don't think about when going on a project like this and establishing a framework is timings and expectations. So in hindsight, I think it would have been preferable to have a clear understanding of all key stakeholders' individual expectations and timeframes to bring the project through to completion. And if you carry this out at the start, you ensure that everyone's expectations are reasonable and match each other's, and ensure that everyone has a greater understanding of each other's workloads to ensure it runs smoothly. This I would probably suggest to do, I think Jessica mentioned it earlier, if you're producing an MOU at the beginning, I think it's really important to discuss these kind of things at that point so you're all on the same page. And I would recommend also just having a frank and open discussion with one another to make sure that you're all on the same page. Next slide, please. So that's everything from me. If you have any questions at the end of the session, please reach out. And in the meantime, I'm going to pass over to my lovely colleague, Tim.
Sorry, Tim, we aren't able to hear you at the moment. Are you able to adjust your microphone? Oh, that's better.
I'm not
We
sure
can hear
what
you now.
the problem is.
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I don't know what's happening. Sorry,
No
folks.
problem, thank you.
Tech visits I've had. I'll start again. I'm just thanking Emily for her kind words. It really is a pleasure to work with her in utility aid, and long may it continue, because not only does it give me professional pleasure for the progress and help we give people, but it really does help so many organisations who are in need of help. So community development action is what CDA Herts is. And we were established in 1966 as the Community Council for Hertfordshire. It was intended that we would be a rural community council in line with most other counties in the country, but the rural element was left off Hertfordshire's because it's considered that the county had both a very urban as well as a rural nature. Several name changes ensued, but we settled on CDA Herts eventually some years ago. But we also refer to ourselves as a rural community charity for Hertfordshire. This is because we're the only agency that actually focuses on rural communities and rural Hertfordshire as a priority. We've always been an organisation that identifies gaps in service provision, and we seek to establish partnerships to address areas of need, making use of our long experience, expertise, and our networks. It was recognised there was a need for an independent, non-statutory body that could build connections and relationships and bring commissioners, managers, and service providers together. to produce solutions where the usual agencies alone could not, and indeed often did not talk to each other. We've all heard about some of them. This makes us an in-demand organisation in Hertfordshire, thankfully. We've delivered many projects over the years, funded by and under contract to various voluntary and statutory bodies, as they recognise we are independent and best placed to host and manage the work. I'll just say that some of which I say will sound repeating what Emily said, but I think it's important that we actually we have a different perspective as the charity, the voluntary part of the partnership, as opposed to Emily, the corporate part of the partnership. Next slide, please. Hertfordshire's Village Halls Advisory Service. Just keep in mind the picture here, folks, because I'll just refer to that later. We're part of the national acre network of organisations that deliver an advisory service. And as Emily already mentioned, there's over 10,000 village halls across England. The advisory service is a key part of what CDA delivers, and it's vital to these rural community assets and hubs, and often they're the only meeting place for many villages in the village or indeed the rest of the parish. As Village Halls Advisor, I support around about 220 village halls and community buildings on a regular basis. This also includes community centres, church halls, scout huts and cricket pavilions, who all play their role in providing meeting facilities in often rather isolated communities. Uniquely in the county, not nationally, but in the county, we have access to the acre resource of about 40 information sheets. They're called sheets, but actually some of them are very lengthy documents, and upwards of a dozen or more charity commission approved model documents, things like trust deeds, hiring agreements, which provide management trustees with all the information they need to effectively, safely and profitably run their community facilities. They cover things like insurance, energy, procurement, employing staff, governance, finance and fundraising, health and safety, safeguarding, etc., the usual stuff you'd imagine. To further support these facilities, as well as the information resources, we organise training, we organise regular networking meetings, we have an annual conference, and we also work in partnership with private providers, such as Utility Aid, where a number of whom have affinity arrangements nationally and locally with ourselves. And we get a little benefit from actually referring organisations to these service providers, which helps everyone. Next slide, please. There's a picture of another village hall. The partnership between CDA Herts and Utility Aid, which Emily is very well covered and very kindly. Many village halls are well over 100 years old. That previous one I showed you on the previous slide, that's actually made of corrugated iron. It's still in use, it still exists, and you can imagine what a cold, very difficult and energy, very poorly in terms of energy efficiency it is. A lot of these halls are very inefficient, inefficient heating, inefficiently used. Often these places are run by very committed, but often very elderly volunteers who don't particularly have any appetite for change, and even less for future planning. Often very short of funds, risk averse, and decisions also can take a long time. So we have a role to try and build confidence in these trustees and committee members to look at alternatives and look at ways of improving what they do. We heard about Utility Aid through the acre network, and not only do they provide a vital service that's free to the users, but CDA Herts also benefits financially. We promote the service, and I refer halls to Emily, and she does the rest basically, and keeps me informed. And CDA Herts earns a very handy commission from any referrals that go on to full contracts. Emily attends our network meetings regularly. Our annual conference is attended in person. We've jointly hosted a webinar where Emily informs our members about the benefits of looking at their energy providers and how they can get a better understanding of the energy market, which is a very difficult thing to put across. But Emily always does it in a very good way that isn't too scary and almost understandable. And we also, together, we provided some very good input to during Village Halls Week, which is run by the ACA Network during March, which was focused on energy efficiency and net zero. I also received monthly updates from Emily, which is great. Emily and I understand that there are factors that interfere sometimes with the smooth progress of a referral, but we're always able to work together, almost intuitively, to overcome any issues. I think that is the essence of a true partnership. Next slide, please. Actually, sorry, can you just go back to the previous one? I forgot to mention about this hall, which is a former village school, well over 150 years old, in a very isolated village in East Hertfordshire. And they now have a very nice solar array on that facing roof there, you can see. And they also have received help from utility aid to change their energy providers and also save lots of money in the process. You'll be surprised how many village halls and probably other organisations are on the wrong tariffs. They don't understand hidden costs, and utility aid help them with all that. And as Emily mentioned, they've saved an awful lot of money, these organisations. Next slide, please, again. Thank you. So in terms of our three-way partnership, and it's unfortunate that our other partner can't be here because of the general election, but I was contacted by him because he was actually on the management committee of a community centre in Hertford, and he was part of our network and attended our network meetings. And he was always actually a very proactive, engaged part of those meetings. And he recognised that they had benefited from the information and resources that we had available and from referring them to utility aid. He moved on to a local authority. And sometime later, he contacted me about a project idea he had, which was to provide an energy efficiency service to these community buildings, because they identify how important these are, and they had some funding and utility aid. He was aware of the remote discovery service, which is very, very affordable for these small organisations. And the project also helped the council to develop a landscaping overview of the status of the halls and buildings, communities and buildings in the area, so they can develop an understanding of the needs for energy efficiency measures, retrofitting facilities in these halls. Subsequent to this, I contacted Emily, and she was definitely up for it, as I knew she would be, and the three of us worked together to produce a project that would work. My role was to promote the offer through our networks and to encourage cajole in some circumstances halls to sign up for what was a very good free offer, and would actually stand them in good stead for making their halls as energy efficient and as near on the path to net zero as they could do. We liaised, Emily and the third person liaised over eligibility and the costs, and basically I just get the information flowing to our halls. Next slide, please. So last slide. So why it works. This is a hall in West Hertfordshire, which has a nice solar array there, as you can see. Emily and I in particular have shared values in how we work and what we think is important in terms of delivering service, communicating and problem solving, often soothing worried brows. We have a shared understanding of how to get the job done, and we both bring to the table something special. We have the contacts and trust of halls, and utility aid have a very undeniably perfectly free offer. They're often cash-strapped charities who need to save money and cut their energy costs. Dissatisfied customers make us both uncomfortable, and we always go the extra mile to resolve their issues, sometimes together. The council, the third partner, is committed to net zero and supporting valuable rural community hubs and providing all important funding. So we are all committed to making this work. The experience of community engagement, what works, what to avoid. There's no simple fix, no one size fits all. You need understanding of the community, local knowledge, and often history. Keep it simple, keep it responsive, and keep it quick. All three partners believed in the project and are committed to making it work and seeing it through, and indeed learning from the outcomes. Thank you, and I'll hand back to Lara.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tim. And thank you to all our speakers. We've got about 8 minutes to go quickly through some of the questions that have been popped into the chat. So apologies if we don't get through all of them, but hopefully we will be able to get through as many as possible. So I'm going to go for one that has been upvoted a couple of times. And Jess, I'm going to send this one in your direction to start with. That we've got a question from somebody who said, how do you navigate or achieve a good ending with a corporate partnership as they're going through that right now?
Lovely. So I think, I mean, without knowing the details, I will just assume that ending, whether it's with a corporate partner or from the same sector, might go through similar stages and might feel similar. And this is where I will borrow a little bit more detail from the Decelerator, which on their page you will find toolkits to sense check and plan for endings. And so one of the first things that they recommend, and these are some of the kind of the principles that they suggest to take into account, is finding agency and determining the pace at which you want to end. And design that ending, and just kind of frame it as an inevitable cycle and change and renewal. So there, again, there's nothing particularly different about that. It should be as natural as a beginning is. And you might think about harnessing the power of language. So using metaphors and narratives to accompany that discussion, that journey, and obviously understanding the technical, practical, and legal steps that you need to take to make sure that you cover all the accountabilities that you have. But as I was saying during my presentation, you really need to give yourself and your partner and your team that space to feel and go through that emotional journey. And on the operational side, it is worth, again, if you're planning on designing something, to assign people roles and responsibilities needed to deliver an ending. So you go through, again, kind of relational, emotional aspects of preparing for an ending, harnessing your ability to create the space and the pace that feels comfortable, and then doing the operational stuff, right? Which is the technical aspects and kind of the assignment responsibilities. Hopefully that gives a little bit more flavor. But as I say, the Decelerator offers actual free advice to civil society organizations. They are funded by lots of organizations to help them do that. So it might be that you might just want to give them a call and set up a free 1-hour conversation with them.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jess. And we popped in the chat the link to that organisation as well that Jess is mentioning. Emily, I don't know whether you had anything to add from your perspective about kind of how to have a good ending with the corporate.
It's a funny one for me to answer, because the ones that in my experience since I've been doing this role specifically that have ended because we've both agreed that it's mutually not been beneficial for either of us involved. So it might be that the organization's goals have changed and ours have changed, so there's not really that kind of mutual similarity or shared interest in the same thing. But usually in terms of deciding whether something's worked or not worked, we always look at the return on the investment that was made. And I think that can be applied to charities as well, like in terms of the time that you've given to this partnership and the project, because there's always, you know, there's got to be some sort of return on that initial investment, and that can help you look at whether you extend certain partnerships and carry them on for a longer term period as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Emily. I'll keep you unmuted because we've got a relatively easy question, I think, for you. Do utility aids still offer assessment surveys virtually, and are they available across the country?
Yes, yes, and yes, they are. We will share some details with Lara and the team to share with everybody afterwards. But I think also our information can be found on the NCVO Trusted Suppliers page, and you can click there to reach out to us as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Emily. We've got one here, which is it's a slightly longer question, so I'll just summarize from what I'm reading. We have a question from somebody who has asked about the fact that they would like to partner with corporate organizations on a time basis rather than kind of financial basis. So looking ideally for corporates to see whether employees could give some time to a regular volunteering slot, basically, with their organization, and just wondered whether anybody had any tips or hints about how to approach a slightly different offer to a corporate than possibly they might be used to. And I'm going to kind of open that to sort of say, does anybody have any tips or hints that you want to pass on?
I think Emily kind of talked about a very good one, right, Emily, about the kind of the return of investment. But I also think that tapping into the corporate social responsibility plans and policies is probably another good one, especially as there might be overlaps between that and your charitable purpose. So that might be another one to link up to. And there's an increasingly number of corporations that are also thinking and actively looking at their investment strategy to make it more ethical, more social, and environmentally responsible. So all of those areas might also be a kind of useful places to look for, again, kind of a natural allies and ways in which you can offer something that might be of interest. But sorry, Emily, you were going to jump.
No, thank you, Jessica. It's really interesting having this with you, because it's just nice to speak to somebody as well that does partnerships and collaboration all the time. But for us, we have a volunteering in our employment contract. Every employee has to volunteer at least twice a year. They're committed to, and if they don't achieve that, there's actually you can actually go on to a verbal warning, and then if you continue not to do that, it gets worse and worse and worse, right? Because we have to live what we say. We have a number of collaborative projects with different organizations, such as the National Autistic Society, for example, where our team will donate so many days and so many volunteers a year, and that's worked really, really well also for us, because we might not have the time to organize that ourselves, so having somebody that's really experienced in that is a really good and meaningful collaboration as well, so something to consider.
Brilliant, thanks, Emily. And I know at NCVO we similarly have a policy where employees can take up to 5 days of the year to have volunteering leave, but they can take that on an hourly basis. But I think part of the challenge is finding those organizations, and that just takes relationship and conversation, as far as I can tell. We'll probably have time for one more, so I'm going to do probably a really quick one, I think, on this one. Who would be the most appropriate person? And this is about local authority, so again, I'm kind of open to anybody answering. Who would be the most appropriate person to reach out to a local authority from a charity in order to start that relationship?
Shall I?
Yeah, go for it, Tim.
That?
Yeah,
it does
absolutely
vary, but as we've been talking about, developing relationships with the local authority is extremely important. I do find, on the whole, it can be a one-way flow. But most local authorities do have a kind of community engagement development facility, so that's worth trying. Engage with your local elected members and find out who are the leads. Maybe there's a lead for community, maybe there's a lead for transport, etc. So find out the who's and the what's, and just build a relationship, get your name and your faces in the organizations known. It can take a long time before any financial help in terms of grants or funding may come with. But in my long experience, eventually it can work, and it does work. but you really have to try hard at it. But just, just be willing to talk and to learn from them about how they work, how to push their buttons, because they're constricted by policies and sorts of things. So it's not going to be instant fixes, but yeah, it is worth trying, and the benefits can be really good.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tim. And I think from the charities perspective, generally from my past experience, I'd say it ideally would be best to be somebody who's at an executive level to create those relationships with local authorities who's got that vision. I am going to wrap us up there. There are more questions, but we will try to make sure that we answer those in the follow-up question. One of the main things that's come up is, are we going to send out the links? After the webinar, you will have all of the links. You will have the copies of the slides. You'll get all the links to the things that we've mentioned, all of the organizations that we've mentioned. Everything will be in the follow-up email. You will also see that within the next couple of weeks, there should be a recording of this that's uploaded onto our YouTube. So you will be able to come back and watch again. I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody who has been here today. We're going to share a really quick snap poll just to see how things have gone for everybody today. And when you leave today, you will also find that you get a Zoom survey that pops up when you exit. And we would really appreciate it if you could fill that in. We do take your feedback really seriously. This is how we often put together the topics and the ones that we are looking for doing in the future. So we really are interested to hear your feedback in what you'd like to hear from us in the future, because we do commit to putting on free webinars, usually at least once a month, if not more. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. On the next slide, you'll find that there is further support and guidance. And again, these will be in the follow-up email to you. And we've had a number of questions about starting partnerships, what it looks like, whether NCVO can help. We do have a lot of resources online, so do take a look at some of these links that we put in here and have an exploration of our website. We can also help on our help desk, and you can get in contact by emailing knowhow@ncvo.org.uk, and we will respond within 3 to 5 working days to try and give you some kind of best practice and signposting. Next slide, please. And lastly, to just say a massive thank you. Thank you again to Utility Aid for sponsoring today. And thank you to our speakers, Jess, Tim and Emily. I hope you all agree it's been a fantastic webinar. I've really enjoyed listening to everybody. Been really, really insightful. If you are interested in becoming a member, if you scan the QR code that is now on your screens, that should take you through to our membership page, or you can find information on our website. Other than that, I just want to say a massive thank you for attending today, and we look forward to seeing you again at a future webinar.